The first time Thomas noticed tire tracks across his meticulously maintained front lawn, he dismissed it as a one-time mistake. By the third occurrence, he realized this was deliberate. By the fifth time, he was plotting revenge with the patience of a man who had spent 15 years perfecting his Kentucky bluegrass blend. Thomas Warner had purchased the modest corner lot house on Oakwood Drive 6 years ago. In the suburban neighborhood of Millfield, where property lines were sacred and lawn maintenance was practically a competitive sport, his corner property had become his pride and joy. Every Saturday morning, rain or shine, Thomas was out there with his specialized lawn tools, perfecting the emerald carpet that surrounded his brick rancher. "You're obsessed," his sister Jen had teased during her last visit. "Most people have hobbies like fishing or fantasy football. You've got grass." But Thomas didn't care. After spending his weekdays trapped in a cubicle crunching numbers, the lawn was his canvas. He'd invested thousands in soil treatments, premium seed varieties, and a custom irrigation system that drew envious glances from the neighbors. His efforts had even earned him a reluctant nod of approval from Mr. Harrington, the retired landscaper across the street who previously held the unofficial title of Best Lawn in Millfield for a decade. Then she moved in next door. Her name was Patricia Caldwell, but everyone on the neighborhood Facebook group quickly learned to call her Karen, though never to her face. She'd arrived 3 months ago in a flurry of complaints about everything from the garbage collection schedule to the brightness of the street lamps. Her social media posts were a constant stream of perceived injustices and demands to speak to various managers. Thomas had managed to avoid direct confrontation until now, nodding politely when they crossed paths while retrieving mail. But everything changed the day Patricia decided that the public street parking in front of her house belonged exclusively to her. "I can't believe this," Thomas muttered, standing in his kitchen as he peered through the blinds. Patricia's navy blue SUV was partially parked on his front lawn again while she unloaded groceries from the trunk. The massive vehicle's right tires had carved an ugly path across his lawn, crushing the grass he'd spent years nurturing. Thomas's phone buzzed with a text from his neighbor Mike. *, dude, the lawn destroyer strikes again. You gotta say something this time, *. With a deep breath, Thomas slipped on his shoes and walked outside. The mid-April sun was warm against his back as he approached Patricia, who was struggling with several shopping bags. "Excuse me," Thomas called, his voice carefully neutral. "I've noticed you've been parking on my lawn. Would you mind using the driveway or the street instead? The grass is getting damaged." Patricia straightened, designer sunglasses perched on her highlighted blonde bob. Her expression shifted from surprise to immediate defensiveness. "This is public property," she snapped, gesturing vaguely toward the curb. "And I'm only on it for a minute. Don't be so dramatic. It's just grass." Thomas blinked, momentarily speechless. "It's not public property, it's my lawn. And it's not just grass. I've spent years—" "Look," Patricia interrupted, checking her Apple Watch with exaggerated impatience. "I have frozen items melting. The street parking by my house is full because of that family with too many cars, and this is convenient. It's not like I'm destroying anything valuable." She turned away, effectively dismissing him, and continued unloading her groceries as if he weren't still standing there. Thomas stood rooted to the spot, a muscle twitching in his jaw. In his 16 years of homeownership across 2 properties, he'd never encountered such blatant disregard for property boundaries. Something hardened in his chest, a determination that went beyond the damaged grass. As he watched Patricia's retreating form, he didn't say another word. Instead, his mind began calculating, planning, and visualizing a solution that would ensure she never parked on his lawn again. The neighborhood had no idea what was coming, but they were about to learn an important lesson. Never mess with a man and his lawn. That evening, Thomas sat at his kitchen table surrounded by lawn care books, neighborhood bylaws, and his laptop open to a forum for lawn enthusiasts. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, but he barely noticed as he methodically researched his options. "Completely within my rights," he muttered, highlighting a passage in the Homeowners Association guidelines. The property line extended to the street, and his responsibility to maintain that strip of grass also meant it was his to protect. But law was on his side, not that Patricia seemed to care about such trivialities. Thomas's phone lit up with a text from Mike next door. *, any progress with lawn destroyer? Saw her give you the talk-to-the-hand treatment earlier, *. Thomas typed back, *, working on a solution. Let's just say she won't be parking there much longer, *. Mike responded with a popcorn emoji. For the next week, Thomas documented every infraction with meticulous precision. Each time Patricia's SUV crushed his grass, he took date-stamped photos from multiple angles, noting the duration and extent of the damage. He installed a discreet doorbell camera that captured the corner of his property, providing video evidence of Patricia's repeated trespassing. 7 incidents in 5 days, each time she'd park, unload whatever she purchased, and sauntered back inside her house without a second glance at the deepening tire tracks on Thomas's lawn. On Friday afternoon, Thomas called in sick to work, the first time he'd done so in 3 years. After confirming Patricia had left for her job at the local real estate office, he donned his work clothes and began implementing phase 1 of his plan. Need a hand? The question came from Mr. Harrington, the retired landscaper from across the street. The elderly man leaned on his cane, observing Thomas marking the damaged area with small flags. Thomas hesitated, then decided having the neighborhood lawn expert on his side could only help. Actually, I could use your expertise. Over the next hour, Thomas explained his situation while Mr. Harrington nodded sagely, occasionally offering suggestions that Thomas hurriedly noted in his phone. What you need, Mr. Harrington said, adjusting his worn gardening hat, is a ground-level sprinkler system right in that trouble spot. Waters your grass and serves as a deterrent. His eyes twinkled mischievously. Those timer-controlled ones can be programmed quite precisely. By mid-afternoon, Thomas had installed a sophisticated sprinkler system that could be triggered remotely via his phone. The sprinkler heads were camouflaged with artificial turf caps, virtually invisible unless you knew what to look for. He planted new grass seed over the damaged area and watered it thoroughly, watching with satisfaction as the ground became soft and pliable. Not a swamp yet, he murmured, but we're getting there. The next morning, Thomas was enjoying his coffee when the inevitable happened. Patricia's SUV pulled up, and without hesitation, she drove over the curb and parked partially on his freshly watered lawn. Thomas watched as she exited her vehicle, designer purse swinging from her arm as she headed to meet a group of women waiting on the sidewalk, apparently carpooling to a Saturday brunch. Thomas waited until Patricia and her friends had disappeared around the corner. Then, with a smile, he opened the sprinkler app on his phone and pressed Activate. The hidden sprinklers burst to life, shooting powerful jets of water across the area surrounding Patricia's SUV. The water immediately began turning the freshly seeded ground into a slick, muddy mess. Thomas increased the timer from the standard 15 minutes to a full hour, then sat back to enjoy the show. 3 hours later, Patricia returned, laughing with her friends until they turned the corner and saw her car. The SUV's right tires had sunk several inches into what was now a muddy quagmire. Water still periodically sprayed from the hidden sprinklers, maintaining the bog-like consistency. What the hell? Patricia's screech carried across the neighborhood. She stormed toward her vehicle, designer heels sinking into the mud with each step. By the time she reached her car, her shoes were caked in dirt, and the hem of her white pants was splattered with brown stains. Thomas casually stepped outside, garden hose in hand, as he pretended to water some plants on his front porch. "Everything okay?" he called innocently. Patricia whirled around, her face contorted with rage. "Did you do this? Did you deliberately flood your lawn?" Thomas blinked with exaggerated confusion. "I'm just watering my new grass seed. Been having some trouble with the area getting damaged." He gestured to the no parking sign he legally installed at the edge of his property the previous day. "Didn't you see the sign? This is ridiculous." Patricia attempted to open her car door, but slipped in the mud, catching. The following Monday, Thomas returned home from work to find a legal-looking document taped to his front door. With a sigh, he peeled it off and scanned the contents. It was a formal letter from Caldwell and Associates Legal Services demanding compensation for vehicle towing, car cleaning, damaged designer shoes, and emotional distress, totaling nearly $3,000. Thomas snorted when he noticed the firm's address matched Patricia's home. A quick internet search confirmed his suspicion. Patricia Caldwell wasn't just a real estate agent. She dabbled in paralegal work and had apparently drafted the letter herself. "Amateur hour," he muttered, adding the letter to his growing file of documentation. That evening, the neighborhood Facebook group exploded with activity. Patricia had posted a lengthy diatribe about certain neighbors who create hazardous conditions and deliberately damage vehicles. She had included photos of her mud-caked SUV, but conveniently omitted any showing it parked on Thomas's lawn. The comments section quickly divided into two camps: those who knew the full story and responded with thinly veiled sarcasm, and Patricia's small circle of friends who expressed outrage without knowing the context. Thomas stayed out of the online drama entirely, which seemed to infuriate Patricia even more. The next morning, Thomas was sipping coffee when his doorbell rang. A police officer stood on his porch, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Mr. Warner, I'm Officer Reynolds. We received a complaint about a hazardous condition on your property." Thomas nodded calmly. "I've been expecting this. Would you like to see my documentation first, or should we look at the property?" The officer's eyebrows rose slightly. "Documentation?" 15 minutes later, after reviewing Thomas's meticulous records, timestamped photos, video evidence, and copies of the property bylaws, Officer Reynolds was shaking his head. "So you installed legal signage," she ignored it, "parked on your property anyway, and is now claiming you created a hazard?" The officer looked toward Patricia's house, and the sprinklers were just watering a new grass seed. Exactly, Thomas said. I'd be happy to demonstrate the system if you'd like. It's a standard time sprinkler. Nothing unusual. That won't be necessary, Officer Reynolds said, closing his notebook. I'll have a word with Ms. Caldwell about making false reports and trespassing on private property. You might want to consider a security camera if this continues. Already installed, Thomas replied, pointing to his discreet doorbell camera. After the officer left, Thomas received a text from Mike. Asterisk cop car next door. You under arrest for excessive lawn care, asterisk. Thomas smiled as he typed back, asterisk officer just giving me lawn maintenance tips. Apparently my grass is criminally attractive to certain vehicles, asterisk. Over the next 2 weeks, an uneasy peace settled over Oakwood Drive. Patricia glared daggers at Thomas whenever their paths crossed, but her SUV remained conspicuously parked in her driveway or on the street, far from his lawn. Thomas began repairing the damaged area, meticulously nurturing the new grass seed. Then came the Neighborhood Association's monthly meeting. Thomas usually skipped these tedious gatherings, but this time he made a point of attending. As expected, Patricia had added an emergency agenda item, proposal for street parking assignments. The community center buzzed with an unusually large crowd as Patricia took the floor wearing a crisp blazer and her most authoritative expression. As many of you know, parking on our street has become problematic, she began, avoiding Thomas's gaze. I propose we assign dedicated street parking spaces to each home, with priority given to those who have lived here longest. Thomas fought back a smile. Since Patricia was a new arrival, her proposal would actually put her at the bottom of the list, but apparently she hadn't thought that through. Or more likely, she assumed she could manipulate the system once it was in place. The association president, Mrs. Abernathy, a retired judge with a no-nonsense attitude, adjusted her glasses. And what about guests? Service vehicles? Would they need permits as well? Well, yes, Patricia faltered slightly. We could implement a guest pass system managed by you, I presume? Mrs. Abernathy interrupted. Patricia's smile tightened. I'd be willing to volunteer my time, yes. Thomas raised his hand and was acknowledged. While I appreciate Ms. Caldwell's concern for parking, he said politely, I should point out that our neighborhood bylaws already address this. Section 7.3 specifically states that public street parking cannot be restricted or assigned to individual homeowners. It's first come, first served. Thomas woke to the sound of his phone buzzing incessantly. Squinting at the screen, he saw 17 notifications from the Neighborhood Watch group chat. The time was 5:43 a.m. Asterisk, someone vandalized Warner's lawn last night, asterisk. Read the first message from Mr. Harrington, accompanied by a blurry pre-dawn photo. Fully awake now, Thomas threw on clothes and rushed outside. What he saw made his stomach drop. Someone had poured what appeared to be weed killer across his front lawn, creating a giant letter K visible even in the dim morning light. Subtle, Thomas muttered, taking photos from multiple angles. Several neighbors had already gathered on the sidewalk, including Mike and Mr. Harrington. Security camera catch anything? Mike asked, handing Thomas a cup of coffee. Thomas nodded grimly. Let's find out. Back inside, they reviewed the footage. At 2:17 a.m., a hooded figure had crept onto Thomas's lawn carrying a garden sprayer. The person had their back to the camera most of the time, but when they briefly turned, the streetlight illuminated a face partially obscured by large sunglasses. At night. That's her, Mike said. Those are the same ridiculous designer sunglasses she wears everywhere. Thomas called Officer Reynolds, who arrived within the hour to take the report and review the footage. Hard to make a positive ID, the officer admitted, but combined with your previous complaints, we have enough to question her. By noon, the neighborhood was buzzing with the news that Patricia had been taken to the police station for questioning. She returned home 3 hours later, slamming her car door with such force that it echoed down the street. That evening, Thomas received a call from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Warner, this is Gregory Winston from Winston & Partners Law. I've been retained by Ms. Caldwell regarding your ongoing property dispute. Thomas sighed. What property dispute would that be? The one where she repeatedly trespasses on my lawn, or the one where she vandalized it with weed killer? My client denies those allegations, the lawyer replied smoothly. However, she's willing to drop all claims of harassment and creation of hazardous conditions if you'll agree not to pursue vandalism charges. Let me get this straight, Thomas said, his voice hardening. Your client wants me to ignore criminal property damage in exchange for her not filing baseless civil claims. That sounds suspiciously like extortion, Mr. Winston. A pause. This is merely a good-faith attempt to resolve a neighborly dispute without protracted legal proceedings. Here's my counteroffer, Thomas replied. Ms. Caldwell pays for the lawn repair, issues a written apology, and stays off my property permanently. Otherwise, I pursue criminal charges and file a civil suit for all damages and legal fees. I'll convey your position to my client, the lawyer said stiffly before hanging up. Thomas knew he'd just escalated the situation significantly, but something in him had snapped. This had gone beyond a parking dispute. It was now about principle. The next day, Thomas took a personal day from work and implemented Phase 2 of his lawn defense system. After consulting with both a landscaping company and a security expert, he installed several subtle but significant upgrades. First, he added motion-activated cameras covering every angle of his front yard with night vision capabilities and cloud backup storage. Second, he placed decorative solar-powered garden lights along the perimeter of his property, illuminating the boundaries clearly even at night. Finally, and most importantly, he completely renovated the damaged section of lawn. Instead of just replanting grass, he installed a sophisticated drainage system beneath the surface. This network of perforated pipes connected to an underground reservoir that could be filled or drained remotely through his phone app. Above this system, he laid fresh sod over a specially designed soil mixture that appeared normal when dry but became extremely boggy when saturated. It's basically a controlled quicksand pit, explained the landscaper with barely concealed admiration. Perfectly safe for walking on, but any vehicle that tries to drive over it is going to sink immediately. And it's all legal, Thomas confirmed. The landscaper nodded. It's your property. You're entitled to install whatever drainage and irrigation systems you want as long as they don't damage adjacent properties. Thomas spent the remainder of the day installing clearly visible no parking and private property signs at regular intervals along his property line. He also added a new official-looking sign that read, "Warning, unstable ground, not suitable for vehicles." That night, Mike and a few other neighbors gathered at Thomas's house for an impromptu barbecue, which coincidentally provided perfect surveillance of Patricia's house across the street. The front tires of Patricia's SUV sank immediately, followed by a horrified gasp from inside the vehicle. The specially engineered soil mixture performed exactly as designed, appearing solid until weight was applied, then transforming into a thick, viscous mud that seemed to actively pull the vehicle downward. "Perfect," Thomas said quietly, sipping his coffee as he and Mike watched from the porch. Inside the SUV, Patricia's expression morphed from smugness to shock to outrage in the span of seconds. She threw the vehicle into reverse, pressing hard on the accelerator. The engine roared, tires spinning uselessly as they sank deeper into the quagmire. Mud splattered in all directions, some of it hitting the white tennis outfit visible through the driver's window. "Should we call a tow truck?" Mike asked, merely containing his glee. Thomas shook his head. "Show me your specialized heavy-duty tow. Regular ones won't do it. That mud is almost 2 feet deep." Patricia tried opening her door, but it was blocked by the angle of the sinking vehicle. With visible frustration, she climbed awkwardly across to the passenger side and tumbled out, her pristine white tennis outfit now splattered with mud. "You!" she shrieked, pointing at Thomas as she struggled to maintain balance on the marshy ground. "You did this deliberately." By now, various neighbors had emerged from their homes, attracted by the commotion. Several were discreetly recording with their phones. "Did what deliberately?" Thomas called back innocently. "Installed a drainage system on my own property. Posted clear warning signs about unstable ground. I believe I'm within my rights as a homeowner." Patricia's face contorted with fury as she attempted to stride toward Thomas, only to sink ankle-deep in mud with each step. She kicked off her now-ruined tennis shoes, abandoning them in the muck. "This is criminal. You've destroyed my car," she shouted, her designer outfit becoming increasingly mud-covered as she fought her way towards solid ground. "Actually," came a new voice, "the only criminal activity here appears to be trespassing and vandalism." Officer Reynolds had arrived, apparently responding to a call from one of the neighbors. He stood at the edge of the lawn, taking in the scene with practiced professionalism, but Thomas could swear he saw the corner of the officer's mouth twitch. "Officer, thank goodness," Patricia said, attempting to regain composure despite her bedraggled appearance. "This man has created a dangerous trap on his property deliberately to damage my vehicle." Officer Reynolds pulled out his notepad. "Miss Caldwell, correct? We've met before. Perhaps you can explain why your vehicle is parked on Mr. Warner's lawn despite multiple previous warnings and clearly posted signage." Patricia faltered. "It was an accident. I misjudged the curb." Mr. Harrington hobbled forward, leaning on his cane. "Funny sort of accident that requires backing up, aiming, and accelerating directly toward a lawn you've been specifically told not to park on, especially after being questioned about vandalism on the same property." Patricia shot the elderly man a venomous look. "No one asked you, old man." "Actually," Officer Reynolds said, "witness statements are exactly what I'm collecting. And we have plenty." He gestured to the growing crowd of neighbors, many with phones recording. including video evidence of you deliberately driving onto private property. Patricia's lawyer arrived 20 minutes later, looking considerably less confident than during his phone call with Thomas. By then, a specialized towing company was assessing the situation, explaining that extracting the SUV would be complicated and expensive due to how deeply it had sunk. My client is willing to drop all claims if Mr. Warner agrees to cover the towing costs, the lawyer offered, maintaining a professional tone despite the absurdity of his mud-covered client standing nearby. Thomas smiled politely. I think we're past that point, don't you? Officer Reynolds has multiple reports of Ms. Caldwell's trespassing, vandalism, and harassment. I have video evidence of her salting my lawn and deliberately driving onto my property despite clear warning signs. And now every neighbor on this street has witnessed her latest attempt to damage my property. The lawyer's expression faltered. Perhaps we can discuss reasonable compensation for the lawn damage then. My client might be willing to. Your client, Thomas interrupted calmly, has 3 options. Option 1. She pays for all damages to my property, covers her own towing and car repair costs, and signs a legally binding agreement to stay off my property permanently. Option 2. I press charges for